Okay, we're going to continue with the lieutenant, starting at page 114. And on page 114, Rook goes down to the settlement. Now, he has just heard from Lieutenant Gardner about the two natives that have been kidnapped and are now going to be forcibly taught English, and they're going to learn the Indigenous language from them. So he's curious. Although he feels a bit disloyal, he is filled with curiosity. And he sees at the parade ground two men shuffling in fetters. So they are in chains. They're like definitely prisoners. And Captain Silk is there with a notebook and a pencil in his hand. And so there's a description of these two natives. One of them, Bowenbar, is the bigger of the natives. There's a roguish sparkle to his eye. And Rook makes a comparison with Bowenbar to Silk, that if Silk were kidnapped and be the guest of some chief of the natives, he would look just the same way. Eyes that found everything interesting and a smile of someone that's having the greatest adventure of his life. The other native is a different make, shorter, sterner, a compact mass of outraged dignity. A very good quote there. It was not an adventure for him. It was an affront to his sense of himself. So his sense of self, his identity is being challenged by being captured like this. The governor is happy. He's got a beaming face. And he is trying to teach Bowenbar English, as we see here. Then Silk is somehow in the middle of it, the quickest jack in the box in the regiment, which is his own words that he uses to describe himself. And Rook is a little bit put out by the fact that they haven't asked him as a linguist. He speaks 5 languages, of course. Why wouldn't you ask Lieutenant Rook? But perhaps he doesn't stand out in the same way that Silk does. He says to himself, "There'll be time. Silk is no linguist. Then they'll remember me." And then there's talking to Warringon, trying to get him to say thumb. But Warringon's attitude is described beautifully on the next page. If you turn with me, he would not even meet the governor's eye. He walked upright and stared into the middle distance as though the governor were not there. He's acting with dignity. And so Rook describes here their physical appearance compared to the men he saw in Antigua, the African slaves. And then he actually describes the difference in their temperament. And he says that unlike the Africans, the Indigenous carry themselves proudly erect. It means they stand up tall. Because of their isolation, they haven't become, like the Africans, expressionless black cogs in the machine of empire. And he and Bowenbar kind of have a moment where they look at each other in the eye. And then that initial scene ends. And I think it's worth making some comparison notes between Warringon and Bowenbar. So make sure that you are doing that in your own notebooks or in your OneNotes as we go forward. And so Rook tries to kind of hover around them again, make some excuses, but he doesn't actually see them again. Apparently they are, young Timpson tells them, they are mostly at the Governor House being shown how to sit on a chair and eat off a plate. There's this attempt to civilize them, which again might be ironic given that their behaviour is far from civilised in terms of standards of human dignity. Now, Rook has kind of, I guess, been his own worst enemy in this sense. He wanted solitude. He tried and schemed to be cut off from the settlement, and was congratulating himself when he had his own space. But now he was robbed of the chance to learn the language because of his isolation. He keeps trying to find some pretext to stop in at the governor's house, and he's plotting that. But then Silk appears and tells him that actually the natives have escaped. They've gone. He says that they were very disappointed because they were making excellent progress with the language. And Silk explains some of the different words. He bumbles through the explanation, obviously is clearly not a linguist. And they explain that they treated the natives like kings. They treated them so well. They didn't let them guess about how few supplies they had. They fed them what would last a week for the soldiers. They fed them that much in a day. Warrangun would only eat fish, but Boimba tried everything, adventurous that he is, and developed a taste for wine. I write a little note here that perhaps there is a link to alcoholism in the Indigenous population in modern times caused by the European influence. And I think that perhaps there could be a hint of that suggestion there. And here Silk tries to find out how these two men were taken in the first place. He's probing Rook to find out if he knows anything. He says, come on, Gardner must have told you about it. And Rook struggles to lie, but he does say, well, the only thing I know is that it was a complete success. And he feels ugly in his skin as he lies. Perhaps keeping a secret, being dishonest doesn't come naturally to him. All Silk is wanting is something that is exciting to add to his story, to his narrative, but Rook realises he has to protect Gardner, that if the way that Gardner had told the story became public, it would be a catastrophe, that Gardner would be suspended from duties, the governor would have to act, he would have to face judgment. Gardner had not obeyed, only regretting having obeyed. Sorry, Gardner hadn't disobeyed, he only regretted having obeyed. He would probably not be hanged, but he would be demoted, he would lose rank. And there is some sense that Gardner must have known that Rook is trustworthy, and that's why he confided in him, that they now share this secret, this trauma that they have, that Gardner has endured and actually unburdened himself. Of course, there's a foreshadowing there, and it's going forward and back. There's the connection to the hanged mutineer, but also foreshadowing the time when Rook is going to have to make that choice of his own, the moral choice.